Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser. And for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. I'm pleased to welcome in Mike Brown, who is one of the founding members of a synth hardcore band out of Orlando, Damage. He's also done some other stuff over the years too, but we're going to focus a lot on the story of Damage, and Mike is here to tell the story. Mike, hello, welcome in.
Hey Jeff, thanks. I really appreciate you having me on.
Now, you are a Florida guy, so I'd love to hear your origin story. So, talk about where you grew up.
And I was born in Florida in Melbourne, and my parents, Melbourne Cocoa Beach area. My dad was with the space program in the '60s, and so that's why we were over there near Cape Canaveral. And then we moved to Winter Park, Florida. By the time I think I was like six, 5 or 6, and we moved to Sevilla. For anybody, people who are familiar with Winter Park, it wasn't a gated community, but it's a very nice, very nice place. And that was really moving up for my dad. He had always been kind of like more of a government kind of a guy and went into private enterprise. So we moved to Sevilla, and why I mentioned that is that eventually, Tyler, who would become one of the singers in the band during the first album and first EP. He was my next door neighbor, and he was a little bit younger than me, but we became best friends at like 5 and 6 years old. So that's where I came from. And then growing up in Winter Park, I would say we started dabbling around with music when I was probably like about 14 or 15, very early on. And I think I wanted to form a band, and I told my parents that I wanted to play wanted to play drums, and they were like, no, 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 no. They really kind of discouraged me from drums. And we struck a compromise that if I took piano lessons, I told them I was interested in, well, what about a synthesizer? And I'm talking about, this is like, I'm like 14 or 15. And they're like, well, why don't you take piano lessons? So I did that, and we kind of bargained. And eventually that's what led me down that path, or else maybe I would have been a really bad drummer. So that was me and Tyler. And we got into, so this is like, now it's like the '70s. And we started to get into music a little bit. We were mostly doing Lego at the time. We were doing Legos. And as we got into music, we started to gravitate in the late '70s a little bit more towards listening to new wave and punk that was going around. And it was interesting back in those days. Of course, you didn't have the internet, but how you would just find out about different stuff. And we'd go to some of the record stores in Orlando and in Winter Park, and you would always have some older guy that would turn you on to something that was really cool. And so by the time I'm in high school, I started like really, I was about 15 or so, 16. I really wanted to, kind of push it and form a band. And we were having a party. My parents were out of town, and we were having a party at the house, a high school party. And we were really drunk, and I had this as part of like piano. I had this piano, this Pink Floyd piano book, and I was playing the song Brain Damage, and we formed like a drunken Brain Damage band with my high school buddies. And so it was Brain Damage originally, and it came from this Pink Floyd reference, which is kind of not very punk rock, but I recruited some people from high school, Dwayne Hoover on drums, and my a good friend Justin Hill was our first singer, and then my really good friend Michael Buchanan was there from the beginning. He was our bass keyboardist, and none of us knew what we were going to do. So we used to like put stuff on the floor. We were banging on coffee cans. We tried to make an electronic device out of a coffee can and a microphone. So we were literally just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what would stick. And so we're kind of experimenting around with that. And we ended up with this mix of two drummers and rudimentary electronic gear. And it was really probably so bad that it was kind of good. I don't even know if I would say Dave Ewing actually, before he was in all the great bands he's been in, he brought over, we had a guitar and it had two strings. I remember him plucking at it. And so it was all this experimental kind of weird stuff. And it was not hardcore. It was not punk. We didn't know what it was. But what happened was, what I always think is the funniest is that eventually we kind of got into, we made our way, we found Jack McGowan as our first real, after Dwayne, he really didn't come from the right background of music that we were going to. We met Jack McGowan through our friends with the Termites. The Termites, we used to hang out with them. I don't know if you've come across the Termites. It became The End. It was another really great band in Winter Park, Orlando. John Washburn was this great drummer. You probably might know who John Washburn is.
I
And
do.
Jack McGowan was, I think, a friend of his, always watched John play. And so Jack, I don't think he just got on the drums and just started banging around. And he was really great, very savage player, but not like a hardcore, not fast, but more just tribal. And so we got this first gig, which was actually, I don't know how we got this, but one of our first gigs was at a Chuck E. Cheese pizza place, playing on the back of a flatbed truck in the parking lot for, it was like, I don't know if it was a Jerry's Kids or Muscular Dystrophy or something like that. But we couldn't, they were looking for like local bands and we couldn't say we were Brain Damage. And so we just became Damage. And so we played this gig and that was like, now we're down to like one drummer and we knew like Mike Buchanan was playing bass synthesizer. I was playing lead synthesizer and I was singing at that point. And yeah,
How did that show go from what your recollection is?
I just remember, so we were really loud and noisy, and we were very young, and we were playing in the middle of the day too. So the sun's out, we're on the top of a flatbed truck. I don't know why, and I just remember my parents pulled up in their car with the family, and they just sat in the car, and they were just like, and they didn't know what was going on. But I was really happy that they came and they basically were like, oh, that's really good. And I knew that that was a lie because I knew it wasn't good and there was no way they could comprehend what we were doing. And they drove off. And I just don't really remember what happened after that, except that they gave us free pizza and soda and they gave us these big cups full of tokens. And we played video games all day as long as we could. And they just kept filling up. And I said that was, to this day, that was one of the best paying gigs ever did, like my favorite. And then later on, we actually played another arcade called Wizards, and this was in Winter Park. And I think that's when some of the first people in the early punk scene saw us. That later on, there were little kids, and maybe even because of that, because we were making all this noise, that they kind of got into the punk scene. But we played Wizards, and that was another one where they gave us all the tokens. And that was if you were a kid growing up in the early 80s and they're giving you tokens, that's like the best.
Big
And so
deal.
yeah, it was like it was great. So we did that, and then probably to round off that phase, we were hanging out with Scott Sanfilippo, or Sanfilippo, or how you pronounce it, John Washburn and Jeff Jacks of the Termites. And I remember Jeff Jacks showed me how to play bar chords on a guitar and taught me a bunch of songs. He taught me about mod music, and they were really into The Who. So that was very formative because it was, they were into The Who, The Jam, like really good bands. and that kind of like pulled me into that world. Although I was playing on a synthesizer, but I kind of learned these almost proto-punk garage band songs from them. I'm in high school and hanging out with them. And I feel like I learned a lot from them from going from just being this really abstract concept of knowing that, oh, you have to have bass frequencies, you have to have like some form of lead, and you have to have percussion that's where I learned that. And then we ended up, we kind of formulated the band and we were doing our thing. And probably the last thing to end that period was we entered the Winter Park High School talent show, and I had heard this legend of this other band years before doing something at a talent show, and I thought it was like causing trouble, and I thought that was really cool. So basically, we gave them a set list of 3 songs, and then when we got up there, we played 3 different songs. We played a song by the Vibrators, a song by the Sex Pistols, and then we played an original. And for that gig, Justin was singing, and I think he used profanity and against the principal, and we got the plug pulled, and we were ushered off stage. So that was the early Damage days. So we also were involved in some other stuff at the high school, very much like just kind of prankster-ish kind of things. And then after high school, I think it was after high school that when I was 18, I started working at a French restaurant called Le Cordon Bleu. I was working there with my brother parking cars. I was a valet. And the reason that figures in is because each night that I worked there, you would make like, $20 a weeknight, you make like $20 in tips. So I would go down to Park Avenue Pub or Decades that were on Park Avenue at the time. And so now I started to kind of hear some other bands and really got into that scene. And at that time, I could see bands like, just for ones I remember, that like there were bands like Norman, Sean Fernandez, I believe, Norman, Shades of Grey. Those are the 2 that stick in my mind. But we're talking about not necessarily not punk bands, but definitely kind of on the fringes there. And plus, it was a pretty raucous live music scene and really great places. And back then, you could go in and it was pretty lax. You could be like 17 and get into a place and watch bands. And so Decades in particular was my real introduction to live like bar music. And that place was amazing. It was such a great time in the scene. And I think that Park Avenue Pub had their act a little bit more together with some of the touring bands and whatnot. But yeah, Decades for me, that was really, the greatest. I also should mention that my oldest brother, Larry Brown or Lawrence Brown, he was a musician too. And early on, he took me to a Devo concert. He was a student at Gainesville, up at University of Florida in Gainesville. And that was also, he took me and Tyler, he put us in the back of his Fiat Spider, drove us up there and introduced me to Devo at just the right time. And that was, of course, very fundamental.
I was going to ask, what did
Yeah.
something like that do to you, considering how Devo really pushed the needle in terms of what you can do as a rock band?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it blew me away. And my brother, Larry, he was an amazing musician. He played electric piano and he played harmonica. And he did bluegrass and kind of country and that kind of stuff. But he was an amazing musician. So he said for somebody to come from, now he's 12 years older than me, so he was a hippie, long hair, beard, a surfer, and he played acoustic, he played bluegrass and all this stuff. And for somebody like that to say, there's this band you got to see. And he's just like, I'm going to take my little brother to see Devo. And he was, he really was a cool guy. And so he took me to for us to see them. And of course, I don't need to tell anybody about Devo, but back in that at that time, I mean, we're talking before the free, it was probably 1980, 81. So before Whip It and Freedom of Choice album,
Right.
that album. But real sweet spot for Devo. It was amazing, and it was just a great show. I don't think I put two and two together of what it meant. For me, but it definitely became like it was like a fundamental moment in seeing what could be done and how you could be in this follow up until that point. I had seen the Kinks, who are an amazing band, but like all the Florida Pat Travers. I'm talking about concert experience. All your standard like '70s, early '80s rock bands. So Devo just really didn't fit that mold. So it was amazing.
Where in Orlando were some of those more touring bands playing some of the larger venues?
Oh gosh. Well, I have two brothers. My both my older brothers. They used to go to, I believe it was called the Tangerine Bowl or the Citrus Bowl back at the time. They like to go see what they called the Super Bowls of rock. Those big shows. I never went to any of them, although I regret that. I was a little bit younger, but you had that. You had these big stadium shows. Tom's Point After was like these kind of like sports bars at the time. It was very mysterious. You drove real Orlando route wasn't built up. So when you drove to different areas, you were just driving in the darkness for like 20 minutes until all of a sudden you came to Tom's Point After. But those are the High Life Fronton, which I think is so funny. There was also, I believe, the Bob Carr Auditorium. I went and saw some shows there later on. Those were, I wouldn't say the most, like I guess is probably as far out as the Bob Carr got was I saw the B-52s there, but they probably wouldn't even do something like the Kinks or something where people might smash the seats.
Sure.
You got to put those for the Clash and the Kinks. You got to put those animals in the High Life Fronton or in the Tangerine Bowl where the seats are metal. So you can't put them in the Bob Carr.
What was your introduction to more hardcore music?
Yeah, so I think that right about the time all this early stuff is going on, so I'm like 17 and I'm just about ready to kind of finish up with high school. There were these two individuals that are very fundamental in the formation of the punk and hardcore scene. Robin Van Arstel, who was an artist, graffiti style artist, and his wife Robin. So excuse me, Regina Smith. So it was Robin and Regina. That's what we always said, Robin and Regina. So they Regina opened up this store called the I think it was a 3 Star. It was either the New Wave Boutique or it was 3 Star Productions that she had her company. And I think before that, we were kind of like in this loosely kind of like punk skater culture. There was skate culture, and along with that, when you went to a ramp, there would be maybe some new wave kids or punk kids, and some starting to be some hardcore kids. But from my mind, the New Wave Boutique was a store. I believe it was in College Park. That was the first place where you could go hang out, and they might have records, clothing. Yeah, but so then as things progressed into maybe 80, around 82, 83, 84, you start to see like punk turning into American, what I call American hardcore. Uh, at the time, for us, weren't really into at least I wasn't into the British or other countries. And so Robin and Regina had this warehouse. They lived in a warehouse because Robin did these large format paintings where he's using almost kind of like Basquiat or Keith Haring. He did use spray cans and he was using paintbrushes and large formats. Everything they had, I remember they had a refrigerator in there, is this old refrigerator. He would paint the door. Everything there was painted, and they were both artists. Regina was more into fashion, but amazing. And they had this warehouse, and so they decided to put on shows. They were also putting out this fanzine. I'll hold it up, The Informant. I don't know if anybody's mentioned this before. With the New Wave Boutique, there's probably ads in here, but
That's my first time seeing that zine.
this is a treasure trove of everything that was going on back there because you can see 688 Club. There's little business cards down here of local businesses. But yeah, Regina would put together this fanzine, The Informant, and it was the first thing that we kind of had that was like, to me, was a formal publication of the Orlando music scene. It says Black Flag on the cover. So they were covering, and actually, that's Robin Van Arstel there. This is some of his artwork. He used to post artwork up all over Orlando. He would post it up on the train tracks and crossings, and you would just see it, and you wouldn't know who it was, but he was very much into doing that. But there's this great, it's this great fanzine, and also, I have other copies of it, but so they started doing that, and then they decided to put on these warehouse shows. And the warehouse shows started, it was local bands. But yeah, so that was local bands. So we started playing. We played a show with the first bands that we play with. We played with the band Descent, which was a skatecore band. I don't know if anybody's referenced them.
I don't think so.
Yeah, Wade was in that band. He's a great guitarist. He's in Orlando. Kimball Collins was their drummer. Kimball Collins went on to become a world famous DJ. So yeah, Kimball Collins, Bob Riggett was the singer. They were amazing. We're a skatecore band. The Bully Boys were a skinhead band, but they, to my knowledge, they had not gotten into kind of like the more of the Nazi skin, white power stuff yet. And I had met Wally. I was at Valencia Community College, and I think I saw Wally, who was a singer for the Bully Boys, and he was on campus. And we probably had some kind of punk rock haircuts or something. And so we just kind of went over and talked to him. And then I remember going back to Wally, the Bully Boys, back to his place. He showed me his guitar, and he was playing some chords, and that was a good early like learning opportunity. But that's how I remember meeting them. And then all of a sudden it's like Damage, Descent. So Damage is this weird synth band. Descent is this just skate punk band, and the Bully Boys were this oi, like really good oi skin sounding music, very basic, rudimentary, but really super catchy. And then I think it was Three Guys and a Bye. I don't want to say Three Guys and a Bye. That was Nadim, I believe Nadim Khan's one of his early bands, and they were just trippy, wild. And then there was another band, Morning Sickness, that would play, and so we all started playing these local warehouse shows, and these were like really good shows. Really good shows. This is where all of a sudden the scene starts coming together, and it was like $3 to get in. You get a cup of chili, a hot dog. Regina was always taking care of all the kids, and you would hang out there, and all the bands would play. And the shows got bigger, and eventually there would be national acts would come through. I remember DRI played, but Damage played a lot of shows at the warehouse. And Jack McGowan, our original drummer, he was playing those shows. And at that time, I kind of skipped, the reason Tyler was not in the band at the time was he had gone off I believe he got sent off to military school or something. So he was kind of out of the picture. So we're at that point a three-piece with Jack, and then Morning Sickness, this band's playing. They're outstanding. And they've got this insane drummer, this little kid, Skeeter. He was Joe Livingston. And we saw him, and basically I was like, he could play real hardcore, like super fast thrash, like, boom, bop, boom, bop, double kick kind of thing on that. And he could do anything. And so we talked to him, and we persuaded him. He was like very young. I think he was like 15. And unfortunately, Jack was a different kind of drummer. So we replaced him. Jack is an amazing artist and a talent, and gave us a lot of energy, but we traded that for speed, and Joe was pure speed. And that's when we started going more in that hardcore direction. Of course, by that time I was listening to, I had shifted to listening to a lot more hardcore. stuff like some of my favorite bands, Battalion of Saints, like really guitar, not only just guitar, but like really Battalion of Saints has some of the like the best like lead lines and also bands like Fang, which I wouldn't say are the most technically proficient, but these are like West Coast bands, Dead Kennedys, of course. TSOL, major fan of TSOL. So discovering all those bands and we wanted to emulate those. And the whole reason we played hardcore on synthesizers was really because I started off and I was really into electronics. I thought synthesizers were really cool. And then I was into electronic music. And then I discovered punk a little bit and I started going in that direction when we were doing stuff like the Vibrators or Sex Pistols. When I discovered hardcore, it's like, that's what I want to do. And was it hard to play hardcore on synthesizers? No, you just had to be really stupid and naive. Like I just like, well, I play synthesizer, but I'm going to be in a hardcore band, and I just and nobody ever really popped my bubble. It was just like that was it. It wasn't. I would love to say is like, oh, it came from we're going to deconstruct hardcore and we're going to do this thing that's completely different. It was just out of a place of ignorance uh, and I think that's the best thing about small music scenes is that everybody's trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of room for acceptance. And everybody's trying to copy something they've seen on the bigger stage, but you don't have the skill yet to nail it. So you end up coming up with something kind of like off-brand weird, and then all of a sudden that becomes the thing. So, but
Did you
yeah,
guys have keytars at that time or just straight ahead keyboards?
I the first keyboard I had, I got at Abney's Discount Music, which was it was on Mills. I think there's like that's it's a Furrier or they sell coats there now or something, fur coats. But Abney's was a big deal for all of us early musicians. I think everybody got their first like instrument. A lot of people got their first instruments at Abney's, and they had this Yamaha CS5. For anybody out there knows synthesizer, single oscillator Yamaha keyboard that I think it was made in the 80s. It got discontinued. It was pretty low powered, but that was my first synthesizer. And it was relatively inexpensive. It was about the cost of a guitar, and it was not a keytar. So it's this thing. So I built out of wood, I built this guitar frame thing and basically mounted that. A lot people were doing that back then. We're kind of trying to make I mean, keytars didn't just, people started making their own keytars. And then it was before Moog came out with the Liberation, which is the one that I played back then and currently play. By the time I think we got to the Warehouse, I was playing a Liberation. And that was a combination. I got that at Discount Music, which is another great music store, and I spent my bar mitzvah money that I had in bonds from when I had my bar mitzvah when I was 13, and my grandmother gave me a check when I graduated high school, and my parents were cool enough to let me. I said, I want to get, I want to get this. They were very cool because they let me make a lot of noise in the house and they let me spend my college money. Well, I guess what normally should have gone towards college. And I got the Liberation. It had been discontinued. It was not a successful keyboard at the time. So I kind of hit it after it had been discontinued and got it. And that's where I'm going to start playing the guitar. And then at that time, Michael Buchanan, who we called Puke had a series of different keytars that he was always changing his, but I only played the Liberation. But also it enabled us to move like a hardcore band, and I was jumping a lot. We were lifting him into the air. We were doing a lot of stuff that hardcore bands were doing, and so it made sense for us. We weren't using them in ways that I think that your typical, like, say, new wave band was using them.
That was at least my thought too.
Yeah.
Especially seeing some of the early photos of Damage, and again, it had a very punk rock hardcore feel when you just can see the energy that
Oh
the
yeah,
band,
yeah. I
band
mean,
had.
we were surrounded, and I'm yeah, acknowledging that years have now gone by, and we're like a real band at this point, and we are playing a lot of shows, so we're learning very rapidly. And then we put out the cassette Tennis Shoe Politics. I was singing on the cassette. It had some of the early songs that I'd written in probably just out of high school or just out of high school. And I have a copy of it. You can see it's just hand drew the cover. It has the space fish. And I should mention that's the origin of Space Fish, where it was at the warehouse shows. So at the warehouse shows, Robin had put out spray cans, and he put up drywall, and anybody could spray paint and graffiti. So the first warehouse show, I do a squiggle and I do another squiggle, and then and it became a space fish, and then that was so that came about, and so that's basically what the space fish at that time looked like. And so we recorded this cassette on all Radio Shack equipment. It was when double decks, cassette decks, the only place you could get one was a realistic one at Radio Shack. And we're talking this very early on. And we had these Sertron tapes, or the cheapest tapes that you could buy. And then we had no ability to print labels. We could use a photocopier, but you couldn't run a label through a photocopier at the time. So we got these black dots, and for side one, side two. So we're talking, this is very early on. And it really doesn't have like a lot of documentation. I thought maybe it used to come with like a lyric sheet or something, but that was like the first thing. And then we were doing the warehouse shows. Tyler comes home from, his military academy, and, is like my best friend. So he joins the band. And the first warehouse shows I think we may have done without him. But then once Joe was in the band, Joe Livingston, then Tyler joined up. And then that was like the first incarnation of Damage as this, I would say, purely hardcore band. This might have been like a little bit more still punk rock edge. And let's see if I have the 7-inch. We go to Melbourne and we record this 7-inch with these happy skinheads in a U-Haul space. I say happy, they're just really jolly, happy skinheads, or at least one. And we stayed at a motel, and we went and we got a couple of cases of Quittin' Time beer. It was the name of it was Quittin' Time. It was unbelievably cheap, like $5 for a case of beer. And we were in the hotel, we got drunk, and we recorded half of the record, this is the 7-inch, Polar Bears on the Beach. And we recorded this, and I think we did a couple of songs, and we stayed over, and then we did a couple of songs the next day. And so this is when, at this point, I think this was early, like 84. Yeah, this says 84 for this. It has it on there. I think we recorded it in 83. And then the skinhead, I don't know his name, super cool guy. They closed up and they bailed, but it was on a Foztex 4-track or maybe 8-track reel to reel. And so we never got to mix it. So the reason this sounds so dry and so shitty was we had this specialized reel, and we didn't know anything about music at the time, like recording. And so we took it to Music City, which is another great music store. And Greg, I think the owner, we persuaded him to throw it up on a Foztex machine that he had for sale. And he was not an engineer, and he quickly dumps it down to, I guess, like whatever master, maybe a quarter-inch reel master. We were talking about this before DAT and all that. And so we sent it off to get the 7-inch made. So we didn't know anything about that. We didn't add delay or reverb, and everything was dry. So, and just keep in mind, Greg, this guy, he didn't charge us anything for this. Everybody would just do stuff for you. You just walk in with a sad story, and people would help you out. So it was another great music store. But these were the first early efforts. And so Jack is on both of these, and then Joe came in afterwards. So we start driving around and playing shows, and we're playing in Tampa, Melbourne, all over where, Gainesville, wherever it's kind of close enough to a drive from Orlando. So we're doing those shows. Orlando's having more shows. And so I started Space Fish Records at that time, to kind of like have something for the business side of it. And that was a label. First, it was just completely just to do our own thing. And then later on, we would start to branch out and, think about doing other things. And that was really the start. Eventually, the scene had evolved, and bands were like, it was real bands, and we had a pretty good flow of touring, hardcore bands. At this point, Jim Faraday had kind of entered the picture. Ed Puglisi is another guy that was from up north, New Jersey, I think originally. He'd come down and started doing shows. There were another number of other people. Fat Harry Productions started doing usually more of the metal shows, but so they started doing like real solid shows, and we had some really decent bands in the area. So beyond like the punk rock or hardcore scene, there was some of when I think of Figurehead, Jim had Figurehead, his record label and productions for live shows. There was Naomi's Hair and Braille Closet. Or actually even before that, I think it was Green Today, which would, I believe, become Mike McCraney become Braille Closet. So for us, they were like everything. They were like really super polished, really great, and we were kind of like the dumpy, kind of sloppy punk band kind of thing. So that was kind of like a different league. But Jim he was doing, Jim has incredible musical taste and started to get really good bands. He would start to give us shows, and we started doing that. And we luckily we fell in with Ed Puglisi, and he started booking us shows. And so things, we got kind of elevated a little bit, and we also kind of learned a lot from them. I think that really the next, without like skipping, hopefully not skipping too much, the next biggest evolution was, I think it probably does skip over some things, but when I met Mike Bales of Love Gods and Leisure Suits, and you have an amazing interview with him. And I was always doing all this like really kind of like, I'm not creative. Like I never did anything that was like, I'm going to play in a band. It had always had to have some stupid angle to it. And I was always like trying to create these different things. And when I met Mike, I think just basically because our orbits kind of came into being, and I had heard about, I saw their cassette tape, Life in the Dak Crown Hell, and I may have reached out. I can't remember, but when I met him, it was like, oh, he's so talented, but we just had the same sense of humor. We were really into like the same kind of aesthetics. I would say it goes beyond like just music, but coming up with a whole backstory. And when I met Mike, then they became the next band on the record label, and Love Gods and Leisure Suits. And so together we started collaborating. It really became like more of a real label, and we used it to produce, our records. Before we at that point, I think we had Synthology was our first full record, and when this kind of like in 85, 86, we recorded in 85, and this album came out. I think this was Mike had heard about this, and yeah, so we connected, and then they were the next band on the label, and eventually we would do together. The Love Gods album was on Spacefish, so it was pretty cool. We also worked with some other bands, and like Bloody Mary. Disco Biscuit, a band that I would later be on. We did the CD and cassette tapes at that time. Target Earth, we did some compilation cassettes and things like that. So that was the label. it kind of like it lives on. Like occasionally Mike will do stuff. He was doing Rocket 88 releases even after I had left Florida and they were under Spacefish, and so that's the origin story of the label, kind of like going from a squiggle on a wall to then becoming a creative collaboration with Mike.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing some of that backstory because I knew there had to be more to it as far as just kind of where things started and how it was progressing over time. And I wanted to share a couple photos if I could,
Sure.
because I know that some of the stories that you were describing, Mike, of the band's early period and just the whole look and feel of the band, there is so much to take in that I think visually you can really get that idea. So I'm gonna bring up some photos here, and anything that comes to mind that you can remember from the picture, maybe where it was and what are we looking at?
Yeah, so that's me on the left. Joe is behind the kit. That's Tyler in the middle. And Puke, Mike Buchanan, playing bass keyboard over on the right. I don't know where this is. I mean, this was definitely early 80s, and it may have been below zero. It's just hard to tell because it's such a black box. As far as the club scene goes, there was one of the first clubs that Tyler and I would go to, and this is when we were probably too young to be out at a club. We were probably like 15 or 16. Tyler would drive his station wagon. We'd go out to basically out to Lake Buena Vista Disney, and John Gardner, the who's better known from Barbarella Beach Club. So he was DJing, and he had this night that he called the Hague, and it was like for us, for everybody in the Orlando music scene, it was like unbelievable. You could go out there, and he played the best music. I mean, basically, he's playing a lot of the stuff now, but he played just like everything you ever dreamed of hearing, and that you listened to at home, but all of a sudden you could hear it out in a place with other people and dance to it. So he was the original. He amazing. Just so he's a DJ. So he had that, but there was no live music out there. But shortly after, you had Spit, and Spit was at the same time. Spit was, I think, I can't remember if this was Altamont or something. Spit was a big giant new wave club, and they were playing like New Order and early Ministry and stuff like that. So that was another kind of cool place. But in general, they also were not really doing live music. So then it was John Gardner that opened up Faith and Physics in Orlando off of the Orange Blossom Trail, the original first one. That's when he kind of, I think Jim Faraday was bringing in some shows. And that's where like Black Flag played, then the hardcore shows started up, and a lot of other shows, like all sorts of great music. For any good music, it was happening at Faith and Physics. So once again, John was there. Eventually, John moved to downtown Orlando and opened up the Beach Club, and that was a pretty good success. At that time, there was no nightlife in downtown Orlando. There was just really nothing there. So it was a very brave move. I don't know how he worked it out with the city council, but he opened up a venue and he was playing great music and occasional live shows. Once again, some collaborations with Jim. So at that time, you had the Beach Club now, downtown Orlando, and then you had Beecham Theater. Beecham Theater was also a venue that could have larger shows. They couldn't have really the smaller bands, local bands or smaller touring acts play there. So, but between the Beach Club and Beecham Theater, you started to have like a kernel of the downtown Orlando scene. You also had Jim I think he was managing Sleep Out Louie's, and that was, to us, that was really far away, but it was kind of in, I don't know, this Castleberry but we used to go there. We saw TSOL, a lot of really great shows. I think that's where I eventually had met Jim for the first time and started making a connection where we could start to get shows there. So you had Sleep Out Louie's, you had Beach Club, Beecham, and then eventually Below Zero would emerge, and a few other places popped up, and that was that was kind of like our club scene. I might be leaving some others out. Certainly, others came, later on, but for a while, that was we were hanging out at the beach club like every weekend, occasionally seeing shows at the Beecham Theater, going whenever Sleep Out Louie's would have Jim would promote a show. We would be there, and it was pretty cool. Other than that, Tampa had, I think, a more sophisticated scene at that time. They were actually starting genres of music like basically death rock, and they had the Cuban Club. So we would go to Tampa a lot to see some of the bigger shows, and we played shows in Tampa
Was
as
there any
well.
difference, in your opinion, between the crowd vibe in Tampa versus in Orlando?
Yeah, I mean, well, Tampa was just much. I think that not to insult the Orlando music scene, ours was more. It was a really tight knit family, a very tight knit scene. I feel like everybody knew each other. We kind of had people that would come in on a regular basis from Melbourne and other maybe lesser developed scenes. Everybody would come to Orlando. We got this really great hub, and it was everybody knew each other. So it was almost like Mayberry. Gonna go back from an old TV show. We were like the Mayberry, but Tampa was a little bit more big city, and at that time it was more intimidating. So they had already had, since even before we started, kind of like had a scene going, a hardcore scene, and also I should mention Miami had like, of course, but Miami was quite a drive for us. Like a big drive. But Miami had some bands, legendary bands at the time, or let's say South Florida between
Right.
Fort.
That was interesting too about Mike Bales' story,
Yeah,
because before he came up to or actually DeLand first, then Orlando,
yeah,
he had time in Fort Lauderdale, but went to some shows in Miami and got exposed to some of the scene going on there, which was very interesting to hear. So yeah, there was a lot going on down there for sure.
yeah. We went down and played at Flynn's in Miami, and we played the Deaf Club. I think that was in Fort Lauderdale, and it's literally a school for the deaf. It's not
Yeah,
like
it was in Pompano Beach.
I was at Pompano Beach, and I think, yeah, with Mike Bales. And I remember we came up because we were doing a Space Fish showcase. So we came up, and this is probably, I don't know if it's politically correct or if I'll burn in hell, but we came up with our own sign language that Mike and I used to do, that we're going down to the Deaf Club. And it was, we would go, Space Fish. That was our sign for, and some of the people that work there, we got there, they're deaf. They're working for setting up. And we go, we're from Space Fish. And that we made that our sign. We were teaching them that, but I still remember the Space Fish. And yeah, we went down there. We played with Love Gods, and that the whole song, Florida Band, is kind of like is about it's about Florida. It's about our growing up experience in Florida. And there's a reference in the played the Deaf Club, and it got rowdy. That happened. It got rowdy, and I think when we were leaving, we got threatened by some. I said strip mall cowboys looking for a fight, and we had some guys that were trying to keep us from loading up our vehicle. I can't remember if we had the bus at that time, but yeah. So it's all kind of autobiographical.
Right. It's neat to hear some of those stories and just seeing where Damage had played. Were there any other parts of the state at this point that Damage played that you haven't mentioned?
Yeah, we were playing later on. We were playing St. Augustine, and we were playing Pensacola. We were playing a lot. I mean, by the time we had, after Synthology, Tyler had left the band. We put out Jubilee of Kindness, and we were touring. So we were going all over the country. And so we would always play different places in Florida on our way out. And St. Augustine and Pensacola, we'd play Gainesville. We played a couple of slam fests, or they would do these things in Gainesville where they get like every hardcore band, like so many from the state. One year they had the band Scream. the hardcore, the amazing hardcore band Scream, and they were headlining this. They called it Decline. They would do these things every year, Decline, and we would play those. And yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's the flyer for the decline. There was a lot of bands you've already mentioned
Yeah,
uh, are
yeah,
on that bill.
yeah. And then from there, you can see Love Gods and Leisure Suits, Bloody Mary, Riddlers, and Damage are all Orlando bands. Are there any others in there? They probably, oh, Craven A was an Orlando band. I think Smegma's was a Gainesville band. And when they say and more, there were a lot more. There were
Okay.
a ton of bands, ton of bands. So we did that 2 years running, and yeah, that was a really really great show. But yeah, aside from that, we actually had a tour that Robin and Regina booked us a tour. But before that, Ed Puglisi, he was working with Buyer Records up in New Jersey, and he was working with the bands Bedlam and AOD, and Dave Scott from AOD is now in Orlando, and AOD is actually in Europe right now. They're touring, but we would go up to New Jersey, so we would play all the way, and we would hang out with AOD and Bedlam. Joe and I were just talking about that we were having a beer yesterday, and our first time seeing the city and driving up and then going to New Jersey, and then they took us into the city. But we were playing everywhere. We were playing everywhere. We'd go as far north as Connecticut. We play in DC, New York. Yeah, Daytona Beach. I forgot about Penrod's. But yeah, and then we were coming back down. We would play Chicago, Detroit. We would play Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Chicago multiple times. So there was a middle section to Damage where we were doing more outside of the state, and we were touring and we were playing with the Adolescents. We played with Flaming Lips, Angry Samoan, so like really big hardcore bands, and we were playing all over the place. And some of our favorite bands, but all of that was happening outside of the Florida scene.
Right.
You know,
Did you have a place that you had played with Damage on some of those tours that stands out in your memory as a fantastic show, or maybe even one that was the total opposite of that?
um, well, early on when we used to play the Cuban Club in Tampa, those were big shows. We played the Slam Fest there, and we were talking about Tampa a little bit. We were always a little intimidated. I mean, they had they had it all. They had a big skinhead scene. They had they death metal scene, and it was much more evolved than ours and mature, and everybody seemed bigger and more, but great bands. But so I would say Cuban Club, we really like playing there. Slam Fest was amazing. It's amazing to be in Tampa and get up there with guitars and play in front of a huge slam pit and to have it be, I think, really accepted. So that was awesome. I really liked the Decline shows in Gainesville. There were a couple of other shows we played in Gainesville. We opened for Government Issue, but a lot of them were at halls. Of course, I mean, the Dead Kennedy show that Jim and Ed put together, the Dead Kennedy show at the Syrian Lebanese Hall wasn't a club, but that was probably my all-time favorite show. We were in contact with Jello Biafra at the time, and we would correspond to him. He would send me records before they were released. He wrote an amazing, uh, uh, I don't know what you call it, like review of us. And we got to open for that show. I think he had written, hardly anybody goes as far as to use synthesizers as an instrument of attack. Damage from Florida are one of the best, if not the only successful keyboard punk band since the Screamers. And that was he written Jello Biafra, Alternative Tentacle Records. So that, I mean, that doesn't get much better than that. But that's why I
No.
believe why we're able to open for the Dead Kennedys. I can't remember, of course, the Jim and Ed putting that together, but I believe he asked. I remember when the Dead Kennedys played, he called out one of our songs off the 7-inch, Jock Mentality, and they were playing. I mean, so much of our stuff was influenced by theirs, and they had these songs about jocks, and he was playing some song, and he referenced and damaged, with their song Jock Mentality, and I was just like about shit myself. So
I know when Jim had come on the podcast, he had referenced that Dead Kennedy show at the Syrian Lebanese Hall was mayhem. So you having Damage, you were one of the bands that opened. What was your recollection of that show?
well, first I would like to say that I was not the one ripping fixtures out of the bathroom. So Jim, you can cross me off that list. That was I can totally feel for him that night. I can only imagine. And but it was for us, it was just unbelievable. It was really hot and sweaty. It was so hot. I can still remember that. And there's I have pictures of us playing there, and I'm just like sweating. And I had this like, yeah, there you go. And I think that balding gentleman in the flannel, that's actually Robin Van Arstel, the guy in the middle of the pit right there. Can recognize him right off the bat. But yeah, it was an incredible show, and we got to talk with the band. There was another great band, Agitpop played that night as well, and they were amazing. But yeah, it was incredible. I do remember it was chaotic. I don't remember. I remember it was a very low stage. It was super hot. It was overcrowded, and there was destruction going on. and but we were kind of backstage, and we had a great vantage point, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, look at that. That's what.
A lot going on in those photos.
Yeah, it's just an ocean of bodies.
I think I remember Jim mentioning that it was over capacity too.
Oh yeah.
So when you guys had taken the stage, I mean, I imagine so many people that were there to see Dead Kennedys.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What was the vibe you got from the crowd when you guys took the stage and here you are playing with guitars?
Yeah, it was. I'm looking to see if I have a picture. All these are, yeah. We have some really great pictures. I just don't have them in front of me. But it was, to my recollection, it was, we were received very well. I mean, it was in Orlando. I mean, it was, people were there to see the Dead Kennedys, but we were known in the area, and we did really well. I mean, we had a slam pit, and our stuff was hard and fast. And no matter where we played in general, once we started playing, it didn't really matter. Just people just started, slam pit started up. So yeah, there we are. There's Joe in the background. You can see him, how sweaty he is. And then you can look at Puke on the right hand side. And Tyler, to a certain extent, we're just dripping sweat. And I had this bandana I would wear when I'm wearing that green thing. It was a Redman tobacco bandana they used to wear to keep the sweat out of my eyes. And but yeah, it was very well received. And not only this show, moving to this that I don't think you get a more classic Orlando show than that of the hardcore scene. I really don't. So I'm so happy and honored that we were able to be a part of that, for what it means to us and to that period for the hardcore scene. It was great. But we also, we would go on. We were traveling. We were opening for the Adolescents on a number of shows, and we played the Axiom in Texas. And I can remember we got up on stage, and it was, I mean, we're talking about audience probably 2 to 3 times larger than that. All these punks lined up, and it's come see the Adolescents. and we're playing It Just Won't Pass, which I always call You Got Your Head Up Your Ass, is what the actual name of the song is. And we're playing that blazing fast, and people are coming in and they were just jaw dropping because in Texas, they didn't know. But then the slam pit, the pit just started, you know? Oh, there you go. Oh my God. Yeah. So we also played at in New Jersey. We got thrown on a bill. Ed Puglisi put us on this bill at the last minute where the Angry Samoans were playing City Garden up in New Jersey, and we opened for it was 7 seconds, Flaming Lips, Angry Samoans, and I think like one other band. And we played. We got thrown on the bill, and we played. Yeah, there you. 7 seconds, Angry Samoans, Flaming Lips, but there were several other bands that were, you know, of course, Damage was not put on there, but we played that show and we were playing and it was the same thing. It was probably, I mean, it had to be like 2 to 4,000 people. This is up
Wow.
north. It's all, I mean, like 2,000, it was a big crowd and people were slamming and, you know, it was the pit was going.
I know
And
their sound had obviously changed and progressed over time, but from your recollection, Mike, what was it like playing a show with the Flaming Lips back then?
yeah, so, I mean, they were more raw. They were like, they were outstanding. I mean, they did not have like as many of like the psychedelic and more polished aspects, but they were like 10 times more the powerhouse rock. You know, they were just like really great guitar riffs and a lot of energy. They were not hardcore, but they were amazing. And we played with them a number of times. We played with them in Orlando somewhere. It was at a hotel convention center or something, like a little Ed got some room that was not set up to do this. And then we also, when we were, it's my wife, Katie. So we were on tour and we were hitting a lot of the same tour dates as the Flaming Lips. And Joe said there was this one time that I think he was driving. We had this van and we had two pink flamingos mounted on the front and it was all painted. And a lot of people remember from back in the day our battle wagon, which Tyler's battle wagon that had the stainless steel teeth on the front. It was all painted up. Well, later on, we had this van that had these two pink flamingos. We pull up at the same time that Flaming Lips does it, like to this club at like 2 in the morning. I think we didn't know where to go. They didn't know where to go, but we pulled up at opposite ends. And Joe sees them and they see us and their bus is all painted up and all like that, but they kind of like knew because we had been bumping into each other. But he said that that was the most, I didn't even remember that, but he said it was the most surreal moment for him on that tour was seeing the Flaming Lips and us pulling up in our painted vehicles. And it was just like randomly at 2 in the morning. I think we played the next day, but you get to a town and you don't know what you get there. And the first place you go is figure out where the club is. And then you go figure out if you're going to sleep in the van or go find a whatever motel. So
I was going to ask that, like, in terms of where you were catching some sleep, were there any moments where it wasn't the most comfortable or you were a little unsure about the whole experience?
when we were on tour, we had a combination of everything. So sometimes we would later on when we were touring with the Love Gods on the Freak Show tour, the Love Gods kind of brought a sense of organization to us that we didn't have previously. And Mike liked to stay on schedule and he liked to get more. So we were staying more in hotels and stuff like that. But sometimes, you know, you start running low on money, you'd sleep in the van or whatever vehicle, the station wagon, and we would do that. And but a lot of times we would, yeah, there's a freak show. And look, we're Orlando, Gainesville, Pensacola. That's in the Florida, but Nashville, Lexington, Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio was amazing. Pittsburgh, not so much. Toledo, Ohio. Yeah, we're all over the place.
You were.
So we stayed at a lot of people's homes. So back then, I remember we went to somewhere like one night we were in, I think like Birmingham, Alabama, or some not too far over the North Florida border, and everybody was like, all the scenes were really cool. So you would discover this small hardcore scene and they would just take you in. And I can remember that after the show, we were on a swing set and one of the guys was a pre-med student and he pulled out this bottle of Novocaine and he said, check this out. And he stuck his finger in and he rubbed it in his mouth. And we were all did that. And none of us could talk. And we were just on the swings like late at night. And then I think we woke up and we were at somebody's home in the suburb. And I took a picture. I don't have the picture, but it was all these punks lined up like 10 feet apart at like 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning. We're all like leaving the suburban neighborhood. And it was so out of characteristic that I like all these guys in jeans and leather jackets and mohawks, all like, and we're all just exhausted. And we're going to our van and we had crashed over. People would don't let us stay at their place. We usually have to sleep on the floor. But a few times we had to sleep in the van, and that was probably the worst. In DC, I remember we played a show in DC, and we slept in the alley after the show, and we spent we spent the night. We spray painted the alley. You can't really see, but this is in Washington D.C. Sorry for the reflection, but we did this keyboard logo thing that we would do with the skull and the hair. So we spray painted. We weren't the brightest bulbs in the batch because we were sleeping in a van and we had spray cans all around it, and we did that, and then we spray painted like that, and then we spray painted another one where we actually put the record label's address. And I think that was a different place. But wherever we go, we were usually graffitiing the alleys when we were sleeping in them in the van. So those were not ideal. Though I'd say the worst situation we ever had, we were in New Orleans. I just thought of this. We were in New Orleans and we had a terrible show. And the girl, I think whoever the promoter was, she put us up in her apartment. And we got to her apartment. And not only were we sleeping on the floor there, but several other bands were sleeping on the floor that had played that night and bands that had played nights before and hadn't left. And it was really super hot. And she lived above a tattoo parlor, and all night long, people were hitting this buzzer and it would make this loud bell ring, and somebody would get up and go down and give somebody a tattoo. So it was like an all night tattoo parlor. And so it was hot. And then I went in, I can't remember, at some point in the night, I just went into the bathroom, which was disgusting, and I took a shower. I was like, I can't sleep, so I'm going to take a shower. And there was this gnarly, like, disposable razor, and I like thought about it, and I really wanted to shave, and it had hair in it. And I just remember shaving, and it was so dull. And I was like, I'm going to get hepatitis. Like, this thing is like rusty. And
Sounds awful, Mike.
yeah, that was probably the worst night that I can remember. Another quick story that Joe and I were talking about yesterday. We had a trailer hitch put on in Orlando by the U-Haul people, and we had a big trailer with our gear in it. And we drove up. By the time we made it to New York, the trailer hitch was getting loose. We pulled into a U-Haul in Manhattan on 23rd Street. That U-Haul place, it's giant. It's still there. And they welded it and they assured us that it was fixed. And then after, when we were leaving the city, we were in New Jersey somewhere and we hit a bump and the trailer hitch came loose, and the trailer was kind of like rocking. And this is the kind of stuff we do on tour. And Joe was like, it was really weird. You were kind of a different person on tour. We found this abandoned restaurant, like some restaurant that it was in the middle of nowhere in New Jersey. And it was a freestanding restaurant, had a parking lot. We pulled over and we unhitched the trailer and we loaded all of our gear into the van. It was a big, long van, put all of our gear in there. And then we chained the U-Haul to a lamppost. And I called up, we went to a payphone and we called U-Haul and we said, we're leaving your trailer. Here's the address. And they were like, you can't do that. You're going to owe the amount of that. And I was just basically like, F you, you guys, it's on you. You guys did it. And we just drove off and we left it there. And I never heard from them again
Wow.
about it. I guess I'm assuming that they went and got their trailer. And then so then the van was full of gear. So I think that after that, we had to sleep on top of like the amps. And it was miserable.
Oh,
So
I can only imagine.
things could always get worse. And
Wow.
did.
Crazy stories.
The crazy stuff that people just don't know about these days. We would tour. We played a show with the Love Gods in Gainesville, and we got paid in counterfeit sub club cards. You know how you get a free sub, you get your card stamped? And the guy who promoted the show was also a daytime manager of a Subway sandwich shop. He gave us a giant stack of Subway counterfeit. They stamped them all for free subs. And we used to go into every city and we had it down. We knew that everybody had to order their subs and nobody pay for them because if the first person went and did the sub club card, then the second did that, they would stop. But there were like 10 of us and we would go through and order all the subs. And then at the end, when we had all the subs were made, we'd give them the cards and they would just be like, and we're like, look, that's it. And then they would give us the subs because they knew that the cards they could pass off, but they knew that they were, but we did that. We also had our tour manager on other, not the Love Gods tour, but Ed gave us this notebook with, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but everybody did this stolen calling card numbers. Like back then, everybody, and so our whole tour was done. We had a road atlas. There's no GPS. We had road maps and you'd stop at payphones and you would type in a number. And if the number didn't work, that's because they figured it out and you go to the next one. You go to the next one, you cross it off. And that same list, every other band that was on the road was using that list and it was using AT&T calling card numbers. That's how we got by, stolen. We got the place in Gainesville gave us a box of government issued condoms and a stack of sub club cards. And then they paid us some cash. And that was among another one of our favorite payments that we had ever received. And for most touring bands, condoms you would think like, okay, well, that's very rock and roll. But we proceeded we would stick them. We used so many condoms. We stuck them on the Love Gods, their antenna. We would get up early and we would spray with shaving cream, spray their van, cover the hotel doorknobs with condoms, put it on their antenna, condoms under the door handle so when they lift it up. So we were going through a lot of condoms, but not for what you would think the intended purpose. But
Did they ever get you guys back for any of that stuff?
Yeah, of course, But that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few other flyers I'd like to share, Mike.
Sure.
Thinking about some of the other shows that Damage had played. And this one is opening up for Fugazi at the Beecham Theater. What is your recollection of that and how did you guys get that gig?
That was Jim. That was Jim Faraday. It was a very well produced show. It was amazing. Big crowd. Fugazi was unbelievable, and it was very generous for Jim to add us to that show. There is a live recording out there, I believe, of the show, so which is really cool. But it was well received because I think that audience. I think you could call Fugazi like a post punk show. We also we played Beecham Theater. We opened for Alien Sex Fiend, and that was a really good show for us because we kind of fit in a little with that world. That was a big show, and I believe that might have been Fat Harry. And then I was getting, you were asking if we ever had a show where we weren't received well. To my mind, we were received well every show except for one, and that was Suicidal Tendencies. So Fat Harry had booked us for the second year with Alien Sex Fiend, but then something happened and he couldn't put us on that show. So we tried to make it up to us by moving us to Suicidal Tendency. And that was when Suicidal Tendencies had moved beyond their skater punk scene to a metal band. I remember I had a cigarette butt flicked at me, and that was a really big crowd there. There was not a crowd that I recognized. and Suicidal Tendencies was really big and big metal, and we shouldn't have, it was not good for us to be there. But we opened for SNFU a couple of times. We went on tour opening for SNFU. I think we opened on some of their tour dates as well as one from a Florida show. And oh yeah, there you go.
It's
So
a cool flyer too.
yeah, that is. I don't know who did that.
Like these creepy minions
Yeah,
right above the damage name.
yeah. It looks like parts of it I did because I would use those weird checky pattern because I just had the rub off stencils and stuff, but I didn't do the top part. Anyways, yeah, maybe Tyler might have helped out with that or something.
This is one of my favorite photos of the band, going back to the energy.
Oh yeah, I think that's Cuban Club. That's Tampa, definitely.
Nice.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. I mean that's what it was all the time. I mean that's what it was back then. And so I think it was easy for us to win people over.
Was there a lot of banter between the band and the crowd?
Uh, Occasionally, but I would talk a lot. Tyler would talk a lot. So Tyler would get into fistfights with people. He was a kind of an imposing figure, not me. I was shorter, and but Tyler's a big guy, and so he was very funny, but he kind of could talk shit and back it up. And I believe at that same show, he was in the Slam Pit, and he just like there was a really big skinhead going against, which used to be a thing, and hopefully it doesn't still go on. But everybody's going in one direction. There's always like some big skinhead that would go against that and just hit people and knock them on their ass, which was not what that was about. And so Tyler's just got we played the gig and he was out in the pit and he just was getting worked up and he had these rings that cast his own jewelry, silver like these rings, and they had teeth in them and stuff like goblins with teeth. And he just he went up to the biggest skinhead that was doing that, and he just went bam and hit him downward, and then drew blood and just boom, 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 and that was it. Tyler didn't get a mark on him. He would get punched every once in a while, but he could deliver. So yeah, he but that was his mixing it up was punching skinheads at the time. So
You also mentioned a little bit ago about the car, and I wanted to bring up a photo of that to give everyone a visual of what that looked like.
yeah, so that is you can't see the front end, the teeth of it, but that was what people call the Battle Cat, or it was a Malibu wagon that Tyler had, and he had painted up, and some people call it the Damage Mobile, and it had these like steel teeth in the front, jagged teeth, and he would drive that thing around and hit shopping carts like in the middle of the night, drive through the Winn-Dixie parking lot, nailing shopping carts. A lot of people from the scene remember that. And in that picture, that's Wade from Descent, the guitarist, incredible guitarist. He's sitting on the car, and that's Denise. I believe that's Denise in his lap. That guy that's got his face obscured, that's Cotton. And he was a best friend of mine in high school and went on a couple of tours with us, helped like road manager, roadie.
I also noticed the WFIT plate on the other car. Was that a station that was important to you too, Mike?
You know, I don't even remember. It certainly became later, but I don't know that I don't know that I was aware of it, to be honest with you back then. WPRK, the Winter Park Rollins College, Jen Zimmerman from the Gin Torturers had a radio show, and that was
Right.
certainly important to us. We were probably much more insular into our local scene, even though that when we were touring there. when we were on tour, we would stop at each college radio station in each market, and we would do a promo, a bumper, and we actually recorded a couple of live shows that are still out there, archived at radio stations, stuff like that.
I also want to talk a little bit about the zine too. We haven't gotten into that whole side of what you were doing as well at that time. I know when Mike Bales came on, he talked a little bit about the Splash zine. So I'm going to bring up one of the covers. And if you can just give us some more intel regarding Splash, the origins of it, and how important this venture was for you in conjunction with the music and also Spacefish, the venue.
Right. So this is back, we had the Spacefish Records office, and we were doing, Mike and I were both graphic artists, and I don't know where the origin of this idea came from, if it was Mike's idea or mine, or we were just sitting around and we said we should do this. We were doing a lot of flyers and stuff, so we just wanted to put out a zine, and we started doing it. And of course, we came up with the contrived name. I don't, Space Fish, Fish Splash, and we made it, Space Fish Publications Limited and Associated Services H question mark. And it was kind of like the Mad magazine of zines, you know. Everybody who worked on it worked under a pseudonym, like a fake name. And Girth Rimway was actually, I hope I'm not revealing, that was Road Narrows, from the guitarist from Love Gods, Road. Kevin Burby is his real name. But so he was several layers deep. He had a lot of aliases. But Girth, we loved his character the most. Girth had this advice column. The first cover you showed, which I actually have a copy of it here, that's Artie Stinkwell. That was my one of my assumed characters. We each had several assumed. I was also, I think, Skippy Pinwheel and Arthur Wingnut and a few other names. But Artie Stinkwell was the editor, and I think I wrote the Artie Stinkwell stuff. Mike was Jib Halyard, which was one of my favorite characters, and Jib Halyard was like a swinger kind of a guy, which isn't, that's totally on with on persona with Mike. And those were, I'm trying to see if there were definitely other ones. Yeah, there's Skippy Pinwheel, action reporter. But it was just it was ridiculous, it was ridiculous. And it kind of fell in. We were doing shows at this point. We started Club Spacefish as a night at the Beach Club, and it was every Wednesday. And Mike and I kind of art directed that, where we created this giant plywood fish. Every Wednesday we would go out, we put up a ladder, and a bunch of us, we would use a screw gun and screwed in the Beach Club. The property on Orange Avenue had this protrusion, this architectural protrusion, this angle that came out over the sidewalk like a marquee. And so it fit this fish. We made this giant fish. I'm talking, it's huge. This giant space fish, and it was spray painted, it was all colorful. And we would put that up every Wednesday, and then we'd have 3 or 4 local bands come in and perform. And sometimes we'd have like maybe a touring band. And that's really what got the whole Club Spacefish thing going. And I think the magazine was a good way to promote. If you look, we were doing stuff like we were kind of like, we were moving beyond just regular shows, and we are coming up with themes like Mars Needs Tuna. And we would have a bunch of bands play. Mike would do this incredible artwork, this science fiction poster inspired artwork. And the magazine was really just a way to distribute the flyers and put other stuff in, all this energy that we had for the music scene that you couldn't fit into the other things we're doing. And we put those out. And
was that being distributed outside of Florida or in Orlando?
No, I don't know what we were doing with this. It was really something we would give out the shows. You see the back covers would have a show. Like we would do the Kiss the Cook show, and we'd serve actual food, and we would silk screen aprons. Like it was all it was experiential. It was multimedia. You would get the zine, we had the label. There would be silk screen printed actual aprons. We'd serve food, and then the show would be on theme of that. And with Mars Needs Tuna, we would do a canned food drive that we would donate the food. So, and you could, it was whatever, $3 to get in, or $6 to get in, or $3 if you bring a canned food donation. So, we were doing all these. Here's another one. I don't know if you have this one. How big is yours? Splash.
I think Mike had sent the scan of that cover.
Yeah, and just our general advertisements for like Feed the Fish, for Club Space Fish Night. So it was a way for us to kind of keep the momentum going as we developed.
Sure.
And we did these different theme shows like Wheel of Fish, where we built this big spinning wheel, and you'd spin it, and it would come up with a category, and you had to answer a trivia question based on that, and you would win prizes. And there was one called you'd hit this one mystery fish. Yeah, Wheel of Fish, the mystery fish, and we had this big white screen hung up next to the wheel, and I would get behind the screen, and I'd put on this hat that had a silhouette of a fish, and then a backlight would hit, and it would just be my silhouette, and I'd get a drink of water, and I'd gurgle whatever the trivia question was, like whatever the stupid question was, and people couldn't even understand. I had a microphone. It's kind of like very Alfred Hitchcock. I'd come in with the hat, just like insanely, just like really silly things. I don't know if I have a picture of the Wheel of Fish. No, I know that I have. There's one. I used to have to keep it in my kitchen at my house when we weren't doing Wheel of Fish, and so when we'd have parties at the house, the wheel was always in the kitchen. So it wasn't, it was just always there. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And the zine just kind of folded into that.
Right. I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of fun going on. And for some of the touring bands that you did get to play at Club Space Fish, any personal favorites come to mind for you?
Uh, well, there were too many. Eventually we opened up our own club at what used to be Negro Cove, and we moved out of the beach club, and Jim brought bands there. He brought The Damned, played at Club Spacefish early on. So that was amazing. Pigface, uh, which was kind of like a combination of Ministry and a couple other bands. That was really cool. 7 Seconds. That show was unbelievable. And I remember that the 7 Seconds show had a line out the door, and it was so over capacity. And we had these police officers come up, and I thought they were going to shut us down, and I was really nervous. And I can't remember what the address was, but they shined their light. They shined a light in over the heads of everybody, and they go, "Looks like you're over capacity." And then the police officer's partner tapped him and said, "No, there's their capacity there." And it was our address, and our address was like 40 something, because he goes, "There's got to," and they thought that our address was the capacity of the club, and they walked away. That's like, I don't know, that's just the weirdest thing to
It
me.
is
I mean,
strange.
first of all, it seems like almost like something intervened there in the cosmos and made that happen, but the show went off.
Right.
But 7 Seconds was a great show. The Damned, that was really good. I really liked just all the local band shows. We also had a night, it wasn't always like live bands. We had the three scumbag DJs, we called it, where we had these three guys that would play. At that time, it was industrial punk and grunge, because now we're in the 90s. And that was a lot of fun. And we would combine that with, I think, like nickel beer or some really cheap beer. And the bouncers would get really drunk. Everybody's really drunk. So those were good. We had, I would say my favorite out of town gigs at our club, Spacefish, at our venue, Big Drill Car, amazing band, and just we ended up staying up all night with them at the bar, just just like until the sun came out. I mean, people were just so friendly, and we just were like laughing and had such a good time. El Duce played, and Chris from Declared Ungovernable. That's I know his favorite Space Fish show because El Duce is one of his heroes, and he got to sit out and just hang out with him, and so that was a big deal for him. But I would say probably Big Drill Car. There was another band very similar where we just hung out. They weren't the biggest of the touring bands, but we just hung out all night, and there was a pop band that played there that the record label put them there, and we just said okay. And I think they were called Blues Train, and they're almost like a Brit pop band, and not a lot of people came out, but it didn't matter. I think they were just doing like a label showcase.
Sure.
And those guys were just cool as shit. And we just hung out with them all night. I mean, we're talking about like this scrappy punk club. And I thought they would have been like, oh, I can't believe we got booked here. And I was ready to apologize for the whole, I was like, yeah, and they ended up, they were just like, they were great. Their music was like total pop. It was not like, but that was another good night, but a lot of really good nights.
Right. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, there was perhaps the most infamous show
Yeah.
at Space Fish, which I'm sure you know where I'm going with this.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And that would be the show with GG Allin, which
Yep.
I got to give a quick shout out to Mark Robinson, who snapped that photo there. Mark has been on the podcast with his band from Fort Pierce, Florida, Foul Existence, and also has Punk Media. So shout out to Mark.
Yeah. 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 Awesome.
So talk about this show. How did it get booked at Spacefish, and provide some additional backstory, if you could, Mike, just around that whole GG Allin experience.
Yeah. I'll tell you, starting from current, a couple of things more recently have come out of it. I was contacted by Michael Bowen, who is kind of official biographer of GG Allin. He contacted me last year, and I did an interview with him about the show, and I found out like what he does, and we've become friends, and I'm hoping to do a bunch of projects with him. He's an incredibly he's into a lot of stuff about with film, like sexploitation, New York City sexploitation. He taught. He's a like he's a professor. Anyways, but I met him through that, and I'm hoping to do some projects with him. And I introduced him to a bunch of people from that night. I also met the guy from Punk Media. I didn't meet him, but I saw one of uh, his videos on YouTube, like a podcast or something
Right.
he did where he visited there. And I just reached out to him. I said, at that time, I typically avoid anything related to GG Allin. I just didn't want to see it because I had some very strong feelings about that evening. But I've since gotten over that. But I contacted him. I said, thank you. I said, you did a really great report. It's the first time I've heard somebody accurately report what happened that night. And I appreciate that. You didn't get it. Like even the Orlando Sentinel got all the facts, and they were supportive, but they got, or now it wasn't Orlando Sentinel. It was the news, the famous news interview, or they got all the facts wrong. And so the Shep Smith interview. So yeah, so that night I had been working on that show. I feel like for about a month. I've been talking to Merle Allen, Gigi's brother, and Merle. We had a lot of discussions, and he had given me assurances. And I said, yeah, I knew I was familiar with GG Allin. And I said, yeah, I said, I'd like to do the show. It would be to us, it would be kind of like an honor to have GG play here because I don't think he's going to play anywhere else, and we could do it. I mean, we're the kind of place that will do this. And so, but we have to worry about some of the more extreme aspects of it. And he said, no, he doesn't do that everywhere. He doesn't do that. he's like, look, we're shooting a video and we're trying to get these shows. And he kind of like gave me assurances. We knew that there would be stuff would happen. I mean, I'm not expecting a GG Allin show to be tame, but I didn't expect him to do the full Monty, like the pull out really all the stops. I'm not really sure how many of his shows where he does every single thing that you've ever heard about with GG Allin. So, I got those assurances, but we knew it was going to be kind of we were going to take special caution. And so it was on a night that we weren't typically open. We had the flyers. We did put up some flyers that said the show was going to have extreme content, which ended up being bad for us later on. But we did put this because I was worried that sometimes we just had some regulars that would just show up and just wanted to have a beer. And I didn't want anybody coming in that wasn't aware that we were open for that GG Allin show. And so we had those flyers up. That day, the band showed up. Merle introduced me to GG. It was during daytime. They showed up. I was at the bar. Mike Buchanan, our bass keyboard. Oh, first of all, the club was a collaboration. We were all equal partners. So Mike Buchanan, bass keyboardist, and Joe Skeeter. We're all partners in the club. I ran the booking and the restaurant part of it. Skeeter was DJ and in charge of music, and Mike was in charge of sound, and ran the bar. So we all had a job. So we're all there, and Gigi comes in. From what I remember, I think he might have been wearing like a hoodie, and he had glasses on, and his brother Merle pulled him over. Merle was very, well-spoken, coherent, and Gigi was basically kind of like a little bit of a he was very very polite, very cogent, but had a bit more of a rock star quality to him with the glass shades and all that. But he was just had his hands in there, and he's like, he's like, Merle was like, Mike, this is Gigi, and I was like, hi, and I don't know if we shook hands or he just nodded, and so Merle took him around and introduced him to my partners, Mike and Joe, and everybody working the bouncers. And Gigi just kind of said hi, and they said, we're gonna go. We got something to do. I think they did sound check, and he goes, we got something to do. We're gonna split, and they left, and then they came back before the show started. I believe Slow, a great band, opened for them. Totally another situation like producers opening for Pat Travers or Damage opening for Suicidal Tendencies was bringing Slow, a really great rock band, but not really anywhere, not even a punk band or hardcore band. But great band. They opened, and then Gigi came in. The band started playing. Gigi comes up on stage. It all happened really, really fast. We had a pretty good crowd. A lot of people had come over from Tampa. It was not our usual crowd, although I did recognize some people, but definitely an influx of different people that were following Gigi. So by the time the show started, they do the opening number. He comes out. He basically, from my memory, stripped naked, and the drummer, can't remember the drummer's name, but he was already naked, and kind of hippie dude back there. It was funny, naked, playing drums. Not something I could see wanting to do, of all the instruments. Not conducive. But he was back there, and Gigi like strips naked and just immediately takes the mic, bam, 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 draws blood, and just kicks off the show. And the music was like rock solid, just really, really good in that like very basic primal way. And it's not long before he's just, jumping off the stage, and he's running around, and it all kind of flew by because I'm like running around making sure everything's okay like I normally do. And Gigi urinates into his hands and drinks it and then spits it at people. Then he starts kind of like a monkey in a monkey. I think he just defecated into his hand and threw it, and then he's chasing people around. He goes back to the bar, pours himself a beer, starts. People are like, kind of people there are loving it, and he's just like chasing around. It's like chaos. But then people who are there just more as like like just their voyeurs to just thought that they could come and observe this but not be a part of it. They start running out. Gigi's chasing them out on the street. He's going out, and it's causing a big crowd outside. People are throwing. Somebody throws a garbage can at our front window, and it starts quickly getting out of hand. Gigi's running in and out, running in and out. We've totally lost control. And then the next thing I know, the police come in, and we got we got raided. The first police officer to come in, he was just shocked. Gigi at this point was covered in feces. He's bleeding from multiple places. He's naked. People are running. He doesn't know if this guy's like a victim that we've tied up and we're doing some kind of satanic ritual on, or he's the perpetrator. And so very shortly after, the lights come on and the band scatters. Gigi runs off, and I get like left holding on to everything. I think they arrest Gigi, they arrest Merle. The other guys took off, and they end up spending a night in jail. They got processed, and I remember paying them their guarantee. I can't remember if it was the next day or if it was that night but it was real quick. We got raided. Gigi got carted off. I think Merle may have been processed. And then I paid somebody else who was with them. And then the lights were on, and we were just a little shell shocked. And then after that, it got a lot worse. And within a couple of days, the next day, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, ATF came and raided us, and they seized our license, and they seized a bunch of our stuff from the club as evidence. And so we had more shows coming up, and so we didn't really know what to do. I was threatened by the police chief. He threatened me physically, verbally, physically. I was threatened by the ATF. They took stuff that we had that we thought was funny, and out of context, they were making a case. And just to give you an idea, which to this day I think is the funniest thing, is we had this hand turkey contest. You know what a hand turkey is? It was like, I think this was like in October or November when the show happened. So we had a thing that on a Tuesday nights you could draw a hand turkey, and if you put it up on the wall, you got like a free beer. So we had this wall covered with hand turkeys, and in the back in the kitchen, and somebody drew a GG Allin hand turkey, and another one, somebody else drew a hand turkey that was all penises, and somebody drew a hand turkey that had 666 on it, like a metal turkey, like a Beavis and Butthead. And so the ATF and the police, took these down, and we're taking them as evidence, like the penis turkey. And then they went into my desk in the back room, and in the background, I didn't think I had anything in there, but I forgot I had these pictures. We had one of my best friends, this guy, roadie, Florida Dan McQuaig. He helped us do a lot of the carpentry work on the club. He built out the bathroom stalls and all that. And so he was notorious for doing like playing pranks and taking people's cameras and taking pictures with them. So during the construction of the club, he had stripped naked, and he took my camera and posed with just his tool belt on and a baseball cap, his LSU baseball cap. And he was posing and all these things. And then he was bending over, and he's got a tool belt on. And so those pictures I had in my desk drawer, they took those photos of Dan somewhere. I don't know. I have to tell Dan that somewhere the ATF has pictures of him from that. They took that as evidence of, I guess, perversion and, and so the city council, we had to go to a hearing. The ACLU was going to represent us, and then at the last minute they had to pull out because somebody gave a statement that misrepresented basically somebody had tried to involve, like they were involved with the show, but they weren't, and said something at the ACLU meeting. And because this guy who was a member of the ACL said, so-and-so from this band told me that they were asked to play there, and they said no. And that wasn't didn't align with my story, so the ACLU didn't know who to believe. But I did get the ACLU attorney did represent us. Just he couldn't put the weight of the ACLU behind us. But so we were. They took away our license to serve alcohol, and I had to go to a hearing, and it was really bad. And I lost. I had it at that point. I had needed income, so I got a job at Kinko's across the street. And then when the news hit, they fired me. So I lost my job. I couldn't get a job anywhere, and a lot of bad stuff happened to me during that period. My car got repossessed out of the parking lot of the club. We had Murphy's Law play, but we couldn't serve alcohol. So who wants to go to a Murphy's Law show? And we had to pay the guarantee. So it was really bad. And at that time, I'll show you this picture. This is basically, you can see my hair. I had a really long mohawk that the sweat. So that's what I look like. So I already look like some crazy Satan worshiper. It had a big blonde skunk streak in it. And so I had to cut my hair off so I could get a job so nobody would recognize me because people would be like, it's that guy. And yeah, it was in the club. Basically, after a month, we didn't really have any way to make revenue. And so I turned the keys back over to Trevor, the landlord, who owned he owned the strip. Great guy. And he accepted it back, and he didn't hold us to anything, and he let us clear our stuff out. And that was the end of the club. And then I had to go to one last hearing, and that was when, or the city council, the ATF waited. They had up to 90 days to make a decision, and they waited the full 90 days, and then they gave us our license back. So, but they knew that if they held it back for 90 days, we'd go out of business. And then the next nail in the coffin was that the city council, the day after we got our license back, they revoked our variance, which we needed because we were within a certain distance of a church. So they kind of like nailed the coffin shut on any future thing. So I never at that point when I had the club, I used to drink a lot during that period. We were always having parties. When I got the club, it was so stressful. I never finished a drink the whole time I was there. I always would start a drink and would leave it. So I say that was probably responsible for me to never really return to that level of drinking. But after that, I used to be a very social person. And for a while, my speech pattern changed. I was kind of stuttering, and I just stopped talking a lot. And it was very traumatic for me. And I would never, there was some videos out there for, like a good 20 years, I would never watch the video. I wouldn't talk about it. But then Joe, when we started working on the new album, Joe did this track called Black Ice, where he took all these samples from the infamous recording, and he put it in there, and all of a sudden it flipped the script on it. I was like, I had to watch it, and I was just like, it was very empowering, and I never had an issue with it again. And that was before I started talking to Michael Bowen about it. So luckily it all kind of worked out. So my feelings about it kind of changed, and it was really due to the Joe wrote that song. And not only as a drummer, but he's a very talented electronic musician. He programmed everything. So we have a song, Black Ice, that's on that. I think it's on the 10-inch that you lifted up there. It's also on our new album. And we have two versions of it. And that's what that song, a lot of everything is about that. And the video has excerpts from the Shep Smith interview and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the story. Yeah, that's the new album. It's out, and we've got an album release party happening up in New York.
I appreciate, Mike, you unpacking
Yeah,
that GG Allin story, because it's not a quick one, but it is one that has a
yeah,
lot of parts to it, and you did a beautiful job revisiting that. I know it's not always easy to do that. You mentioned you've come quite far since then, and that is great to hear. But still, I can imagine just that was important to you guys. I mean, Club Spacefish, you shared so many great memories and stories behind that. I wanted to ask, because of the closure of Spacefish and all that had happened with that, did it have any ripple effects on the local scene in Orlando?
You know, I I left Orlando a couple of years after, but during the time, somewhere between when we did Club Spacefish and afterwards, downtown Orlando got a really thriving scene with a lot of really great venues, including like, of course, Firestone had moved in at that point. That was a big one, and The Edge. And but there were also Yab Yum and a number of other great clubs. Below Zero was doing stuff. So it was, I mean, downtown was reinvigorated. I mean, they went from being when John first went there, he was the only thing bringing people down there, and now it was like 7 days a week. There's people on the streets, and so I'm not really sure what impact it may have had. I was very focused. I I would say one other thing. When I asked promoters or people to show up and support at my hearing, and I remember Fat Harry showed up and he sat out in the waiting area for, they wouldn't let us, but we didn't know what we were up against. The attorney didn't know really what they were going to allow us to do. And Fat Harry sat out there for I don't know, probably 2, 3 hours and just sat out in a folding chair along with some other people. But I'll never forget that. And a lot of people said Fat Harry, he was a metal promoter and he was all business. He was all business. He wasn't real. Jim was much more in support of the scene and the artists and all that. Fat Harry is just more, but I really appreciate that. He really, I don't know that all the bands saw that side of him, but he was very supportive. So there was some good stuff, that came out of it, people that were supportive.
Right.
But yeah, I really don't know. From my perspective, I cut my hair off and the band broke up. Damage never played again in that configuration. That was what broke the band up, and we all eventually would end up departing and going to different corners of the world for a while, and it was devastating for the guys. Mike Buchanan, we thought about trying to start up another club. Me and Mike were looking for locations. And Joe was just really, he didn't want to have any part of it. And then eventually Mike and I saw it's just too much. It's too much. We can't, everybody knows you can't just go to Castleberry. They don't know about what happened. So we gave that up. I started trying to do some limited events at the Beach Club again. And, then I decided against it. I felt like I was just going to repeat the same thing over again. And I just thought it was not healthy. Joe and I teamed up with Dave Gage after Club Spaces. We teamed up with Dave Gage, a great friend of ours from Dope, Bloody Mary, really really good friend. I'd known Dave in the scene very early on, and it gave us an opportunity that we finally got to form a band together. And we did Disco Biscuit. I played bass guitar. Joe was the original drummer before Ed stepped in. And so that was a good outcome. And Disco Biscuit, we played a lot. And then I just realized I was just kind of stuck in a loop and I left town. I just didn't want to keep doing the same things. So that kind of was like the last chapter of that. But it had some really good times post GG Allin, and all of that really 100% focused around my time with Dave and Janine Gage. She's a very talented musician. And so I had great times with that. Everything else was kind of shitty. And so yeah, that was the end of Club Spacefish and basically the end of Damage for quite a long time.
Wow. I do want to take a quick moment just to share a photo of the Disco Biscuit. What do you remember about where this was taken?
Yeah, that was a house party, and that was probably our first time playing. That's Joe back there in the middle. That's me on bass. I think that was my Ibanez bass.
Was there a
And
learning curve there, considering that you had been playing guitar for so many years? Did you have to learn to pick up the bass at that point, or did it just come natural to you based on your musicianship with the guitar?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started playing bass a little bit very early on when Damage was going on. Jen from the Jenna Torturers, she was a college roommate with the girl I was dating at the time, and Jen's boyfriend was a bass player from Jerry's Kids from Albuquerque. It was a really great hardcore band, not to be confused with the Boston Jerry's Kids, but so he came out and I bought his bass off of him. So that was I think my first bass, and he showed me some stuff, and I was interested in bass. And so I then played a little bit on the side with Damage. I played with some friends in a band called Mother Mary and the Chicken Rondelets, which was basically a gag band, but we played a few shows. And so I was playing bass a little bit. And I was probably the worst bass player that Dave ever played with. I've listened to all the other recordings, and he's played with some amazing bass players. And yeah, so it wasn't hard for me to rise to the level of bass playing that I liked. I was a big fan of Minor Threat and Second Wind, some of the Discord bands, and I modeled my bass playing, which was very fast pick style, but repetitive. I wasn't playing scales or anything. I mean, you can see my fingering on that photo. It shows that I am not a very good bass player. But you know, Dave liked it as far as Dave was a really great guitar player and singer. Joe was outstanding drummer. Later on, Ed the same. So, you know, I could just kind of like I could stick to a groove. I understood from playing in Damage what it meant to stay in time with the drummer. I understood fundamentals of music, and I just had to get some better calluses on my fingers, and that was it. But by the time I was done with Disco Biscuit, I could play. We were playing really fast songs. Well, live, they were very fast, and I could do it without a thought. You know, it was just like muscle memory, and it was great. It was, you know, so yeah, the Disco Biscuit years were amazing, and I enjoyed them a lot. I was That was the hardest thing to leave that period, but I wanted to get up to New York and
Sure.
try some different stuff.
Was that the last band project that you had done in Florida before you did move up north?
Yeah, yeah, that was the last band, and it was a great one to be with. We played a lot of shows, and you know, we did the CD. I don't have a copy of it in front of me. That was the Space Fish Records release, and you know, we played all over. At that time, there were more venues. We played the Edge a couple of times. We had some great opening slots. I can't remember who we opened for. Because I saw a lot of bands there, and sometimes my memory inserts us as the opener. Can't remember which. I mean, I saw the Village People play there, and I know we did not open for the Village People. So that's the only one I can say for sure. But my memories get mixed up. We played with Fire Hose, but that was at a different place. We played a show with Marilyn Manson before all they were amazing, but they were not a signed national act. We played with them in Orlando, and they were when I saw Marilyn Manson, the band Marilyn Manson, you just knew that they were like a cut way above. They had just so much charisma, and the songs were tight for whatever it was. When I saw them, I was like, amazing. It's a great band. And one of my first after I moved up to New York, the now much bigger Marilyn Manson, like maybe 4 years later, they'd become really big. I saw them perform at the Limelight in New York, and it was outstanding. The whole show, the art direction, the theatrics, the visuals, top notch, musicality. Of course, we played with a lot of really great local bands. Bughead was a favorite back then. And it was a good time. Yeah, we played the Mill. That was a place you could play in Winter Park. We played Decades out by UCF. Also, that was another Decades Damage had played there. I think we may have. I can't remember who we opened for there, but we played shows out at Decades.
Did you guys have any shows at UCF?
Yeah, we played a show at UCF. Damage did. and on a big stage, and I can't remember what it was for. Somebody else sent me some pictures of it, and I vaguely remember it, and I don't know what it was for. But we weren't the only band. It was on a big stage, and it was doing something, but it wasn't like a really accepted. I think we were recording our Euphoria album at the time, and I don't think I was. This is the yeah, the Euphoria Damage album. And at this point, we had toured 4 times, and I don't know what we were doing at UCF, but it was it was a good. They also had a radio station. I think it's WUCF. I think we did something potentially there, but yeah, I don't know what it was.
I'm going to share this flyer here. Perhaps you can talk a little about this show at Will's Pub.
Oh yeah, so unfortunately, Dave passed away 10 years ago of skin cancer. And there was an original tribute show that Janine had put together, I think a year after. And Joe and I hadn't played together as Damage in a long time. And I can't remember what year that was in, maybe 2016 or 17. But Janine got Joe and I to play. We came down and we relearned the songs. There's pictures of it, just me and Joe. And we did, that was the first time we got back together as Damage. But the funny thing was that Joe was living up in Brooklyn, and I had a band I was doing. I would record under the name NWSPR, and it was really just me, but I'd play occasional live shows. And Joe and I were sharing a practice for like 10 years. We're sharing a practice space, and I sat in and played synth at a couple of live shows for his band. The singer from his band was an excellent drummer, played drums at a festival for my band when we did the live configuration several times. Joe didn't want to do it. He didn't want to play drums for whatever reason, but he always would hook me up. And so we're doing all these projects, and we're all like for 10 years. We never mentioned Damage the whole time. We're just doing other stuff. We're sharing practice space. And then one day, like back in 2022, I started writing Damage songs again, and I approached Joe. He was no longer in New York. He's down in Philadelphia, and he'd just gotten married. And I said, "Hey, do you want to do some Damage songs?" And he's like, "Absolutely." And so he would come up and we would record up in New York, and we started recording the latest album. And, we're so into it. And I know that there's a reason why we didn't do it. I feel bad that we like playing music together. I feel bad that we didn't do that we lost that potentially 10, 20 years we could have been doing that. There's a reason why we didn't do it. I got married and I had kids, and there's no way I was going to be doing that. But, now we've kind of found our way back into it. And, Janine, Dave and Janine are two of our favorite people in the world. And Janine had come up. She had a work gig. Her and Anne Marie Kahn came up in 2024 for a work gig in the fall. And then we were telling me, yeah, we're having a party over at Joe's house, and he's DJing, and a bunch of people, Charlie, I always call him Aceto. I think it's a Cheto, but from Target Earth, he was there. A bunch of Orlando people at Joe's place. And, we told, oh yeah, we've been working for the last year and a half on an album. We're going to put out an album. And Janine was like, oh, can you want to do the album release down? And, that's how that came about. So that's what that show is about. And it's really a dedication to Dave, who we love and so many people love. He's a very talented musician who not only played in a number of bands, but also participated and supported so many bands. And then really Janine has since taken up the mantle and has been playing in a number of bands and has her band, the Tchotchkes. So she was gracious enough. She included us, and we were happy. And once again, it was at Will's Pub. And we thank them for having us down there. And it just all worked out. So, Yeah, that's what the event was. I can't, I don't, I don't like to think about another 10 years, but definitely if I'm able, I would do it in 10 years again. But I hopefully there's other excuses to get back together. But
Right.
there's there's a connection between people in Florida, Orlando, Florida music scene, and New York. And probably a lot of people in New York came from the scene, and we still say somewhat connected. No
So
problem.
I just wanted to share this picture because
Mhm.
this is the current iteration of Damage.
Yeah, so there's Joe in the middle. There's me on the right with my original Liberation, even though I've had a couple of them. That's the one I always say I'll be buried with my Gibson Ripper and my Liberation. I will never give those up. And then the handsome fellow on the left, going by the name Joshua Clark in the band. He is a very talented musician in his own right, has a very big, internationally known chip tune. Uh, I don't even want to say because I don't want to connect the two together, but he's very well established in his electronic music. And he's one of the early people that I met when I came to New York. He had always liked Damage from an electronic. He had a very big hardcore punk rock background, liked electronic music as well, and so he liked Damage. He had the albums, and so I very nervously after. I think it took me more time to get up the nerve to ask him to play in Damage than it did for me to ask my wife to marry me. That
Wow.
yeah, and it was really I was really nervous about that. But I had to get really drunk, and Josh were around the corner of a bar, and so he joined the band, and I am now playing with the two musicians. If you ask me who I would want to play with anywhere in the world, who the people that I want to be with, it would be Skeeter and Josh. So that's my happy ending and recording Damage.
And it's just great getting a chance to have you on, Mike, to tell the story. There's always, we could probably spend 10 hours and I'm sure there'll still be more to cover. So you covered a lot and
Yeah.
it's really appreciated, Mike. So thank you so much for doing this.
Well, Jeff, thank you for your patience. I know it's a lot. It's a very winding story, and potentially I went in directions you didn't intend on, but yeah, it's I come back to Orlando and I love what's going on there, and it's home to me, and that's why we consider ourselves a Florida band, even though I've been away for a long time. It's really it's you can take the boy out of Florida, but you can't take Florida out of the boy.
Certainly understand. And it's just 95 south, right? Or a 2 hour plane ride. So as we get ready to close things out, Mike, I'd love to give you the last word. Any final thoughts you'd like to share to the folks out there checking this episode out? The floor is yours to take us home.
Yeah, sure. I think that I just want to end by saying, of course, I'm sure I've forgotten to mention so many people and so many bands. And I just want to, there were some real giants of the music scene and back coming up through there. I mean, some of the early bands like Shades of Grey, Norman, all the, Brill Closet, Naomi's Hair, all the people like Tracy, who is now married for a very long time, Marty, formerly of Naomi's Hair. She was originally involved with Spacefish, but so many people were involved with Spacefish, Mike Bales, and all of the Love Gods. So it was and is a beautiful scene and something unique that goes on in Orlando. And it's a pleasure to come back and visit it. So yeah, I'll just end on that note that for everybody that was there, and if I may not have mentioned your name, I apologize for that, but I thank everybody, and it was a lot of fun.